arrives. We're going to begin with our moment of silence and pledge of
Today were the services for a former Peoria councilman member, Vicki Hunt. So if you could just hold her family and friends in your hearts when we go through this today. So thank you.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on to 3.1, address agenda and consider adoption or recommending changes. Board members, do you have any changes this evening?
I just would like to, recommend changing a request again for moving public comment back up to the beginning of our meetings, especially when they run long, and having families and grandparents and parents sitting here kind of late. So I'll just put that request out there.
Are there any other requests? I don't have any either. I motion to accept this agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion made by myself and a second made by Mr. Sandoval. Board members, please cast your votes. Actually, I was going to say.
I apologize. I haven't logged in yet. If we could do a voice vote.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mrs. Rooks?
No.
Mrs. Ewing?
Yes.
And President Proudfit?
Yes. Motion passes. Moving on to 4.1, recognitions. Ms. Airy, do you have any recognitions for us this evening?
President Proudfit, members of the board, no recognitions this evening.
Thank you. Moving on to 4.2, board comments. We will start with you, Mrs. Ewing.
First off, I just want to say I'm thinking of all the families this week who they had graduates last year in May, and who sent most of their kids off to college this week. I know my son started down at South Mountain Community College, so that was an ordeal. But it's after he sliced his finger open and had 8 stitches, but then we got him into his apartment and he got all settled. But I know that a lot of families are sending their kids off to higher education for the first time, and that can be exciting and scary all at the same time. So I just want to say I'm thinking of those families. And then this past week I went to the UCAN meeting, which is just one of the Peoria meetings, City of Peoria, that they run. And a lot of those nonprofit organizations come together to try to talk about issues within the city of ways to reach out and help. And I just really want to appreciate all of the partnerships that we have with our faith organizations out there who really do a lot to support the students and the families of our community. So I just really appreciate them. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sandoval?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, with me missing last meeting, I just want to say welcome back to everybody, our teachers, staff, bus drivers, all of our food service workers, students and families. Living close to some of our campuses and hearing the band play early in the morning, and and just the number of cars that exist around our elementary schools at the drop-off time and pickup. It's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, and looking forward to another great year. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Rooks?
I just wanted to give a shout out because I saw it online and it just looked like a really happy video to begin the school year. Alta Loma had their SLO, Officer Del Sol, does jump roping with the kids at recess. And I know Otaloma Elementary shared that on their Facebook page, and I just thought that was really cool to see him out there with the kids jump roping. And just, I thought that was a great video to highlight for the beginning of the school year. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them.
That was a really cute video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. So to Melissa's comment, yes, this is the week that if you had graduating seniors that they are off starting school. One thing that I've been doing is attending a lot of farewell meetings for past students of mine. So I pulled some stats. For the graduating seniors in Peoria Unified School District in the past 18 months, I want to just read where they are serving in the world. So Tanzania, Arkansas, Peru, Mexico, South Korea, Chile, New Hampshire, Brazil, Kansas, North Carolina, Fiji, Washington, Australia, Utah, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Uruguay, the Philippines, Tahiti, Oakland, California, El Salvador, Portugal, Guatemala, Michigan, New Jersey, Spain, Argentina, Madagascar, Dominican Republic, Alabama, New York, Canada, Ecuador, Kenya, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Louisiana, Mozambique, Colombia, and Alaska. I was amazed. Look at where our PUSD students are, literally all over the world. And so that was just something that I've been attending a lot to as we watch our seniors go forth. It's always impressive to me, the impression and the reach of education and how far it actually spreads in the world. So I thought that was really cool. All right, moving on to 4.3, superintendent comments. Turn the time over to Dr. Summers.
Good evening, President Proudfit, members of the board, cabinet, and guests. I'm going to begin my comments this evening by reading from a memo dated August 19th, 2024 to our governing board from myself regarding an update on Mrs. Tartaglio's mediation process. Dear governing board, I am pleased to inform you that we have successfully resolved the level 2 grievance involving Mrs. Landa Tartaglio. Over the last few weeks, I have engaged in constructive conversations with Mrs. Tartaglio regarding her concerns and the path forward for her within our district. Key points for Mrs. Tartaglio moving forward are recognition of dedicated service. Mrs. Tartaglio has been a steadfast leader within Peoria Unified for nearly 3 decades, serving our students, employees, and community with unwavering dedication across various roles. Her commitment to the success and well-being of the students under her care has been exceptional. Adherence to ethical standards and district policies. During her tenure as principal, Mrs. Tartaglio was not aware of any criminal wrongdoing involving Coach Batillo. Based on the investigation, it was clear that Mrs. Tartaglio followed district policies and legal requirements. As a mandatory reporter, she promptly notified district leadership and the Peoria Police Department as soon as she became aware of the allegations against Coach Batillo. 3, support for transition into her new role. Mrs. Tartaglio will now transition to a role focused on serving students with exceptional needs as the administrator on special assignment within special education. In this capacity, she will leverage her extensive skills and experience to support our most exceptional learners across the district, a role that aligns with her strengths and her passion. And number 4, refraining from executive session. In accordance with Mrs. Tartaglio's wishes expressed prior to the August 8th board meeting and following the successful resolution of this mediation, we recommend that the governing board refrain from entering executive session on this matter. Through meaningful conversations and collaboration, we have not only addressed the immediate concerns, but also reaffirmed our commitment to the core values of integrity, collaboration, excellence, and equity that guide our district. In closing, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation for Mrs. Tartaglio's leadership and contributions to our district. We are committed to supporting her in this new role and ensuring her continued success, and I want to thank you for your continued support and understanding throughout this process. And that will take us into comments, starting with how yesterday was the second modified Wednesday of the school year and the first district-led professional development day. So we had several staff members from throughout the district participating in 81 different learning opportunities, including courses on utilizing new tools, increasing classroom engagement, assignment show, and shares, and more. These sessions were crafted to provide pertinent and timely content that fosters the growth of staff. I would like to thank Dr. Hernandez, her team, and the countless teacher leaders who work each month to provide these opportunities to our staff. Also, Peoria Unified remains committed to opening our doors to our community, families, and extended families. Coming up on Sunday, September 8th, is Grandparents' Day. To help celebrate schools throughout the district, we'll be hosting events for grandparents to participate in over the next couple of weeks. So to learn more and to see if your grandchild's school will be hosting an event, please check out their social media platforms. I'm also pleased to share that we will soon be launching the Lifelong Learners Academy on Monday, September 23rd. After the success of the Retiree Leadership Academy, our communications team has chosen to open this fall's academy to all who live within our school district's boundaries and all who are interested in learning about Peoria Unified. Throughout the academy, participants will learn from leaders, engage with community partners, and experience what school is like for the 35,000 students in Peoria Unified School District. Topics include school finance, community connections, Peoria Unified's history, safety, support services, and what we teach. Those who would like to join the academy are encouraged to email our public relations team. Lastly, this week, Peoria Unified alumni are moving into their dorms at ASU, NAU, and the U of A, and next week, our Lopes will be moving to GCU in addition to colleges and universities all across the nation. I'm eager to hear of all as they continue to learn and grow in this new chapter. And we urge our recent alumni to join the Peoria Unified Alumni Network so that we may stay in touch and celebrate all your successes. And that concludes my comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to section 7.1, we're going to do a first read of policy section GCF. We're going to turn the time over to Ms. Vesley.
Good evening, President Proudfit, members of the board. Tonight, we're bringing forward a first read of policy GCF, as you can see up on the screen. And we have Arizona Revised Statutes 15509 and SB 1558, which requires an individual who applies for employment by a K-12 school district to disclose if said individual has pled guilty, no contest, been convicted, or is awaiting trial for various offenses, including dangerous crimes against children, sexual conduct with a minor, any crime requiring sex offender registration, and/or crimes in other states in similar categories. A knowing violation of this statute is a Class 6 felony unless failure to disclose was due to a good faith mistake of the law. And so what you see here is one sentence added that helps with the law. And on the last page, you will also see the reference, the legal reference of 15509 added here. I stand for any questions or comments or discussion at this time.
Thank you. Board members, any questions or comments?
I don't have any, thank you.
I don't have any either. Thank you.
There is none for me. Ms. Brooks?
The only question I have, I guess, is this a new state statute, or is it we're just kind of adding in extra from the law that's currently written? I didn't know that part, that piece.
We get regular updates from ASBA as they review the law, and as they're reviewing those legal pieces, they always go back and will add any additional pieces that they feel would be pertinent. So this is the copyrighted document from ASBA and adding that in as they've done their audits of our board policy.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Moving on to 7.2, first read of policy section GDF. Ms. Vesley?
Thank you. Once again, President Profit, members of the board. This is the same policy. It is for our support staff, GDF. So our first one was for our professional certified staff, and the same language is added here, as well as the legal reference to 15509.
Board members, any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
I don't have any. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Wonderful. Moving on to section 7.3, the first read of policy section GCQC. Ms. Vesley?
Thank you. President Profit, members of the board. Tonight, we are bringing forward another read of policy GCQC, resignation of professional staff members. It's being brought forth as part of the continued conversation regarding resignations and the assessment of liquidated damages. The policy is attached, is the copyrighted policy from ASBA that discusses resignations of professional staff members and removes all language referencing liquidated damages. Any Peoria Unified specific language regarding years of service and benefits that we've seen on our previous policy would be added to the regulation once we get the policy approved. So tonight is just a first read, and I'm looking forward to any discussions, any comments that you would like to add. Again, I would like to make reference that this is the copyrighted policy directly from ASBA, and when times allow us, we always like to go towards that copyrighted. It is not mandated, and there may be pieces that you would like to have discussion on and provide additional feedback for me.
Thank you. We do have one public comment tied to this item. Ms. Trina Berg.
Good evening, President Proudfit, members of the board, cabinet. Trina Berg, President of Peoria Education Association. As you know, I've made no secret that we have been advocating for no liquidated damages at all for a very long time, and I'm super excited to see that that no longer exists on this policy. I do have one concern about the policy. The first part and the last part of the policy, and I don't have it in front of me anymore, but it's that statement that says that you resign conditionally based on like the replacement of your position. I don't remember the exact wording of it.
He's going to pull it up for you.
Thank you. So that the release of an uncompleted contract may be granted contingent upon the availability of a well-qualified certificated teacher as a replacement. That line right there has not existed in our policy as long as I can remember, as long as I've been here, as long as I've been looking at policy. That line right there makes it sound like if I put in a resignation, if I put in a notice, that I can't be released from my contract until I have someone come in that is a well-qualified certificated replacement. And I can tell you that that is not something that's going to ever be easy to do. We have unfilled positions right now that are filled with non-qualified, non-certificated people. Depending on what our position is, we may not have a whole lot of certificated people out there. I know there's not a whole lot of people certified to teach earth space science like I am. That one statement right there is problematic. I feel like our policy needs to say what we want it to say. So if we want people to give a notice, like a 2-week notice, like a typical business policy, then let's make that the policy, that we put in a 2-week notice. If we put in a 2-week notice, regardless of when we break that contract, we should be able to just break the contract with our notice, with no liquidated damages. If we don't have liquidated damages, we don't need any of the contingencies that we have currently in the policy. Another concern I have is the part of the policy that says if you break your contract, you could be subjected to the state laws, whatever. We all know that that's the thing that says that, you know, we can be reported to the state and our certificate could be in trouble. I know that our practice has not been to do that, but if it's in policy, depending on who is running our HR department, that could become something that happens every single time. So that language is also not the best language to have in our policy. If we really want something that says if you abandon your job, if you put your keys down, you walk out one day and you never come back, I would support that language being there for that, because that's not appropriate. We shouldn't be doing that. We should at least be giving the district a notice that we're leaving our position, whether or not we're in the current contract or not. I am super excited to see no liquidated damages, but I think we need to fix the rest of the language to make it the best possible policy we can. To answer another question or another concern that's brought up a couple times in the past, teachers don't leave because we don't have liquidated damages. Like, we're not going to leave en masse because they don't exist. I think if you have a district that has a mass exodus of teachers, there is a cultural issue or a cultural shift that has occurred that has driven people out. So I do ask that we bring this policy, continue with no liquidated damages, but we fix the policy and make this policy just all around better. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions, comments? Mrs. Ewing?
Yes, Ms. Vesley and Dr. Summers, I sent you an email earlier today, and so I said that I'd bring it up. I do agree that it would be, if possible, and well, first of all, I want to start with, I know when we get these policies over, I know that ASBA, they write the policies so that they're in adherence with the law, but I know that they also write the policies and allow for space for each district to make their policies local and specific to themselves. So there's always room to do that. And I would say that any type of change that we make, that's going to get rid of the copyright. I think in general practice, it's a good idea to run it by our lawyers before we actually put it in there. That's just what I think is good practice. So just want to preface my request with that. But I would like to put a time frame in that first part where it says a release from an uncompleted contract may be granted contingent upon the availability of a well-qualified certified teacher as a replacement. And I feel like you could say not to exceed 30 days or 30 to 45 days, so that if, and if that's the correct language, so that if 30 days from that point of notice. So if they noticed, you know, I'm just going to make it easy. If they noticed on September 1 that if we didn't have some, we could let them go earlier than September 30th if we had somebody filled. But if we didn't, we wouldn't hold them in that position for 30 days, unless I'm reading this incorrectly. Because if it takes us, we have some positions that it may take us 90 days to fill. So does that mean we keep them for 90 days? And I think we've had other conversations that if an employee is ready to go and they don't want to be here anymore, then especially if they're in front of our kids, they're not going to be putting forth the best effort. So we, you know, but I want to make sure that 30, you know, that time frame is a workable time frame for HR. And I'm also hoping if we put that in there, it will encourage more conversations with our employees who are thinking about leaving, so that we have the opportunity to say, hey, is it just that we need to shift you into a new position? Maybe there's another opportunity to maybe not be losing folks. So that would be one of my requests. The other request is, I just am in the second part there, it says a teacher who resigns contrary to this policy may be deemed to have committed an unprofessional act and shall be, anyway, so it reads the rest of that. But I just didn't know if there should be any language put in there that, that we're allowing an employee to be released if there are like unforeseen circumstances due to the employee's health or employee family, that basically, you know, if they get into a car accident and they're, you know, in a coma, or, you know, just, or their spouse has, or their child, if there is room to put something like that in there, if we're reading this literally. So those would be, and I know I sent you the email, so those are my kind of suggestions, and I'd love to hear what the board has to say, but I'd also like to see, Ms. Fesley, what you think. And I think I had added in that language that those unforeseen circumstances, if you want to list them out, that then it could be at the superintendent's discretion, so it doesn't necessarily have to come before the board. So those are my suggestions.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yeah, thank you. I know we've been talking about this subject for some time, but so does it make sense to revert back to to our current policy, right, but eliminate the liquidated damages? Because I think in that policy, we adapted it a little bit with some, I think, an item that would not impose liquidated damage. I think one of them was if you realized an advancement, whether it was internal or external, we added that, right, to our current policy. But I guess my question is to streamline this process, does it make sense to look at reverting back to our current policy with the edits that we most recently made as a board, and just eliminate liquidated damages from that policy, right? Because it does have some contingencies in there that you know, allow for an individual to move on if they realize an advancement and not, you know, have their record reflect, you know, that they've abandoned a classroom. Look, I believe that none of our teachers would intentionally abandon a classroom, so there's that. But again, to streamline this process, I'm just wondering if it makes sense to revert back to it, eliminate liquidated damages, have those most recent edits that we made, and take a look at that. So that's my comment and recommendation and thoughts. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mrs. Rooks?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions, and I'll just get into a quick comment. I guess one of the questions I have is, what is the district's responsibility with the side when it comes to contracts? Like, what if a district breaks the contract with the staff? Is there any I guess, consequences on the other side. Because I just was thinking a lot about that because we're talking about, when we're talking about a contract, there's two entities. And so what happens when it's the other way?
Once there's a signed contract, we do not break contracts. We would go through a resignation, or if there were concerns, we would go through our process of discipline, process the possibility of evaluation and improvement plan, and then work towards the end of the year. Should there be a resignation that might be in the best interest for everyone, we would work through that process. So we work on the value that we assign contracts, and once they are signed contracts, they are valid for the year, both from our perspective as the employer and for the employee. I think I stated probably about a month ago that in reaching out to the Arizona Department of Education, while this language is in the law, and I believe that's why this language is here about unprofessional, it is an unprofessional act in the state of Arizona that is in the law. It is considered unprofessional conduct to break your contract. I can tell you that most districts do not turn people into the Department of Ed because they are working through so many other needs, concerns, investigations, that they would focus their attention on that first. And so we would look to possibly bring forward those that might be job abandonment. And so I understand where Trina Berg is coming from as well. We had conversations this morning on our drive in to work, and I'm listening to all of your feedback, and I appreciate it, and would love to hear your comments as well, and then I would like to end with another thought as well.
Okay. I guess my other thing too is with because I did pull up the ARS 15-545. And so looking at that, you're saying that other school districts aren't really following that. And so I just don't know if that gets into legal side. Are we then going to be held accountable of what is currently written in law? Because I know that law, different verbiage in the language of the law, is that going to get us in any type of trouble not following it when we do? Like if it says it, I mean, if
Are
it
you
says
saying
it
like
there.
if we don't report? Does
Yeah,
that put us
because I
in
mean,
okay.
it's in, I pulled up the Arizona statute and it's in the law. So what happens with that? Like, I don't know if we need to have a legal executive session to kind of get that questions answered so that that part's covered. That would just be a question for, from, Ms. Besley and Dr. Summers. But then also, I'll just reiterate that to me, I want to make sure that these kids are not affected. That's the number one priority on my mind. Because just, Deer Valley District just brought it back. And so that is my biggest thing. I don't want the kids affected. I've never seen this happen where you have taken away. All I can go off of is what I've heard from other districts, that they did lift it and people left in drones. And I don't know if it is a culture thing. I just know it happened at the same time. And so my concern first is always going to be making sure this doesn't affect the children, where we're making a big change that is, David Sandoval, you've been doing this for a long time. So it's been a long discussion. And so that's why I always talked about having a balance so that we're making sure that kids are not affected. And then we're also making sure that we're not penalizing teachers for, I don't agree with $3,000. Like, that's insane. Or even, $1,000. But there has to be something to where we know that these kids are not going to be affected. So I'll just leave it at that. Legal advice would be great, just because that law, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. We're for sure going to have to, because we're obviously not going to have a copyrighted policy. We're for sure going to have to check with legal. It might be as simple as turning the language in the second paragraph to this policy, or, a teacher who resigns contrary to this policy may be deemed. It might be as simple as changing that one word of that is a course of action we could take, to Mrs. Rooks's point. That way we're not holding, then mandated to do so. I don't love the language of the release from an uncompleted contract may be granted contingent upon the availability. It puts the onus on the teacher when, depending on what they teach, we have schools that teach sign language. That's not a very readily available teacher pool. And so that, I'm not sure how to implement that fairly. I reached out to just an alternative policy source to see what their policy is, like their policy language is on this. And then also, honestly, you know, I'm coming from the business sector, reach out to the HR director we have at our company to see, okay, well, what actually is our policy? And it might be worth looking into the 2-week resignation process, because during that process, as we've talked about, gathering data from teachers who are wanting to resign, that might be a great touch point with the superintendent to be able to gather that data so we understand if someone is resigning mid-year, exactly why that's happening or exactly what they didn't have, what they needed. I think I would love to see the first draft of that minus the liquidated damages piece. We might be making this needlessly complicated when it is fairly straightforward. Also, just to what Mrs. Rooks was saying, have we seen, I know our last meeting 2 weeks ago, you know, we've essentially not had liquidated damages since May-ish. Have we seen resignations? Because I know up until 2 weekends ago, 2 weeks ago, we didn't see, you know, droves of, and I know several districts, Scottsdale being one of them, does not have liquidated damages. Have we seen in the past 2 weeks any uptick in that?
We have had a handful. The ones that are coming through, there are unforeseen circumstances, could be medical, could be family. Yes, and we had one as early as today where someone unfortunately had to leave, is not able to give a 2-week notice. So I think we really need to think about, if we're going to add the time frame, when we have to think there are unforeseen circumstances that are out of an individual's control.
Well, and that's the thing, is I think anytime we add language in, we almost want to keep it somewhat ambiguous, right, because we cannot possibly put into policy everything that could possibly happen on the timing side with providing a replacement and then also reasons for leaving. And so in my mind, that really needs to be left up to the discretion of HR, you know, under the direction of the superintendent. That being said, having the superintendent gather the data on what is happening, I mean, it's no surprise I'm not a fan of liquidated damages. So those are my thoughts. That was a lot. Do you feel like you have what you need to take next steps?
If I may just process and summarize what I think I'm hearing, President Proudfit, members of the board, a month ago, when we first started this discussion, I did bring forward one that had liquidated damages, one that did not have that, and it would not be copyrighted. I think that what I'm hearing from you is we look to bring that back as a first read instead of maybe trying to make changes to this one, because that might be a little softer and allow a little bit more flexibility. So if that is the purview and the direction of the board, I'm happy to do that.
I know I would love that. Mrs. Rooks, do you have?
Well, I just had a quick question, because you mentioned, President Proudfit, different sources that you went to, and what ideas they had. I didn't know, did they have any ideas of?
They did. A lot of the language was very similar to this because it's based on statute, so it was fairly similar to this. So I think this is going to be a situation where we're kind of taking a copyright off and making it our own, so to speak, but very similar language.
Okay. I guess I would like to also know, when you bring that back, you mentioned previously that Deer Valley District just recently brought liquidated damage back, and I just didn't know if you could maybe call over and ask why, what was their reasoning, or if you already have done that. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Thank you, President Proudfit, Mrs. Rooks. I have spoken with them. I can readdress to see, is it working? I believe that there was possibly direction from their board to look at ways in which to bring liquidated damages, because we know, again, that if we report someone to the Department of Ed, they may not, because of the number of investigations that are coming through, may not be able to investigate it. So I believe it was probably similar to the conversations that we had many years ago, is a way to think about not having an individual leave contract mid-year. But I'm happy to reach out, and I can bring that information back.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Is that, you good?
Yeah, no, I think for me, just one really quick comment. I want to piggyback on Mrs. Rook's earlier comment around, you know, being centered around student success. Absolutely right. I agree. I mean, all the decisions that we make up here and as a district, you know, are centered around student success and their well-being. And I think the balance is with this, I've got to believe that an individual who goes through the education, the time, and the financial resources to go and get, that education certificated, and commitment to serving our youth on a daily basis, the bigger impact, is having that record at the state level in your file, right, versus any dollar amount. So I think the balance is that, fostering inspiring work environments, for our teachers as well. So, but yes, absolutely agree. It is all centered around our youth, without question. So thank you.
I'm just going to ask that since Dr. Summers comes from Colorado, another district, I just wanted to get your feedback on if there's anything that you, having been over lots of different employees over your lifetime, if there's anything that you feel like we haven't mentioned, or any concerns or anything, like just from your perspective of being able to carry out something like this, since it does fall to you. So I'd love to have your input.
Thank you. So having listened and heard a lot of the conversation and the feedback over the last few months, and relative to the last meeting's vote and where we are relative to this most current version that we're bringing forward today, the first thing I just want to say is I appreciate how much effort and diligence is going into getting this right. And I think we've heard a lot of really good feedback. And just to echo Mrs. Vesely's comments, I think we're close here. We obviously don't want to overcomplicate the situation, and we want to make sure that we are, yes, certainly in a position to execute, which I believe we are. And just to answer the question of since May, I don't believe we've seen, I haven't looked exactly at trend data from this year compared to previous years. I don't believe this year represents a significant shift of any sort, based on the fact that out of roughly 4,000 employees, 2,000 or so certificated or licensed staff. We know we're going to have life happen, and that oftentimes is really what's behind the movement. I think when you read statute, and really see, the point is that all resignations have to be approved in writing from the board's perspective. And what we're bringing forward to you all is really a vetted, validated, yes, the resignation is valid and there's a good reason for it. And sometimes there may not be, but that's not something that I think any policy is going to be able to get down to every granular detail, which is why you're all speaking about having enough flexibility for exception. I think the last point I would make to that is recognizing that at this point, the will of the board is clearly not to impose liquidated damages, also recognizing that there's an opportunity to review that practice, perhaps on a year-over-year type of a basis. Certainly, you don't want to be in a position where you have a pendulum that's swinging one direction through the other, but I think this also very much, I'll just kind of get to the bigger question I think you're asking, Mrs. Ewing, which is, when we talk about enhancing the employee experience so that our employees feel like they are making the right choice by not only coming to Peoria Unified, but by staying also with Peoria Unified, this actually will closely align with one of the goals that will be covered in just a moment here. So I think we're on the right track. I think we have the right intent and the right effort. I also, again, just appreciate how much we're trying to get this right. So with the feedback that we have and with the refinement that we can make, as well as with additional legal review, I think we'll get there probably by the next meeting or two at the most. Ms. Vesely, anything else you would add to that?
Thank you, Dr. Summers and President Profit, members of the board. What I will plan to do is have a first read based off of feedback. We'll review in cabinet. We'll bring it back one more time as a first read, and we'll make sure that we have it right. We have our goal to work through this we have it through September, where we have already stopped liquidated damages. We have temporarily suspended it, so that is currently in place, and I know our employees have appreciated that. I know our associations have appreciated that as well. So we have through the end of September, and if we need to, then we can extend, but I have every confidence that we will have this done and have a second read before the end of September. So thank you, and thank you for your feedback.
President Profit, I just had a quick question popped into my head and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. If it's possible to see, just with our partnership with the city of Peoria, I don't know if there employees, if they sign contracts, do they have anything similar? I don't know if you know of that, or any surrounding businesses that we work with.
Thank you, President Prophet. Mrs. Rooks, I have not reached out to the City of Peoria. I will share that my HR director, Mr. Joshua Snow, is coming from industry, from Honeywell. So signing a contract coming into public education was something new for him, and signing a contract for a year was very new for him. So in his realm that he worked in, it was a 2-week notice. So he and I have had many discussions about how interesting it is, and knowing that you have to sign that contract for a year was a little daunting as he was coming into public education. So I believe, depending on the company you may work for, that there are going to be different policies, but that was definitely something that he is not used to. You don't sign a contract for a year. You go off of evaluations and performance, and where he worked, he was able to leave, and they would give 2-week notice. I'm happy to reach out if you would like.
No, I appreciate you explaining it. I guess that's just interesting then when you talk from that perspective of him coming from that industry. I just always wondered then why do we have contracts, I guess. So just interesting.
I will echo that. Yeah, that was the same thing as I dug in with my HR director in the private sector. They also have non-competes, which obviously would not work in education, but the non-compete is a big deterrent because you have X amount of time after you leave that you can't work for another company in that same industry. So that's another kind of deterrent. But yeah, same thing that you found is the same thing. I found that the 2-week notice, and then if they were to leave immediately, that they go to a non-rehirable status was what I found. So thank you for your diligence, and thank you, board members, for making sure that we really get this right for our teachers and for our students. All right, moving on to 8.1, so our only action item tonight. We are going to be talking about considering the approval of the 2024-2025 Superintendent Annual Goals and Superintendent Evaluation Tool. So we'll turn the time over to Dr. Summers.
Thank you again, President Prophet, members of the board. Excited to finally have the updated and hopefully soon to be approved annual goals and evaluation framework for your consideration this evening. So recognizing that we've actually had quite a bit of dialogue up to this point, starting in June at our governing board retreat and then followed by our study session in July, and additional feedback that was received over the course of individual conversations with you all. What I am pleased to present is this finalized document. And so what I'll do is just briefly highlight sort of the flow and the general trajectory, if you will, of the goals as they are currently outlined. So just for ease on the eyes a bit, if you're a highlighter kind of person, you'll see each of the goals, 8 different goals that are highlighted. Goal 1 is the only goal at this point in time that has specific metrics and outcomes attached to them. And I'll just touch on that for a moment. So goal 1A is all about improving student academic outcomes for all learners through multiple measurable indicators. And so what we're looking at there is across the continuum, starting in kindergarten all the way through high school, that we have demonstrated improvement in both academic achievement and growth indicators. And because that is our most important goal, that will be weighted at a higher level. One of the pieces of feedback I know we talked about was how the goal point distribution would be established. And if we just scroll to the second page for a moment, I'm just going to touch on that little table toward the end that shows future goal attainment. So what you see there are each of the 8 goals represented with the total points possible, starting with 1A with 24 points, 1B, which also has measurable outcomes attached to our district culture and climate survey data that we collect from students, staff, and parents. That will be weighted at 12 points. And then goal 2, which really gets to the essence of school safety, and goal 3, which is all about enhancing employee engagement, wellness, recruitment, and retention. Those first three goals, with goal 1A and 1B being divided, really represent about half of the total points possible. And then the subsequent goals, starting with goal 4, around deepening high-quality instruction and highly effective leadership, followed by promoting stakeholder engagement and strong community partnerships, practicing fiscal stewardship and long-range facility planning, reviewing and renewing our district strategic plan, and goal 8, which I would offer up as a little bit more of a shared goal between the superintendent and governing board around evaluating and ensuring effective board policies and development, really gets us to that total of 100 points. So the bullets that are underneath each goal, in addition to the anticipated board review timeline, really reflect what I would call objectives that we will be able to share updates on over the course of this entire academic year, and why we have a few different months and fall into winter, into spring identified, is to be able to develop that cadence that we've been talking about relative to each of the different respective goals. And then if you scroll down to page 3, there's the table that corresponds to goal 1A on academic performance categories. And then table 2, rounding out the last page of this document, are the 6 different categories across, again, parent, student, and staff survey data. And this was, if you recall, one of the things that we talked about relative to finding some of those lower response categories and really honing in on what measures are going to yield, hopefully, what outcomes. Those points are very straightforward in nature in terms of if it's less than the current percentage or within a range of about a 2-point growth, all the way to 2 points and up, achieving the full amount of points. That's essentially how that distribution will work there. And then if we can just briefly highlight the second document, because in the evaluation framework, and I'll let you blow that up maybe just a little bit. What you have here is the 3 different parts that will compose the overarching superintendent evaluation. So part 1 will be modified from our current framework tool to include multiple standards, starting with educational leadership and the standard for facilitating the development, articulation, implementation, and stewardship of our vision. Standard 2 is all about advocating and supporting curricular and instructional programs which promote the success of all students. And then standard 3 is aligned with the relationship with our governing board, developing, nurturing, and maintaining productive and professional relationships with the board. Standard 4, communications, implementing positive and proactive communication strategies for effective parent and community involvement to improve the learning environment for all students. Standard 5, effectively managing services, programs, operations, and resources. Standard 6 is demonstrating high standards of ethics, honesty, and integrity in all personal and professional interactions. So what will happen, and if you scroll down one more page there, and then to the degree that the goals will include a progress update in March of 2025, which will be aligned to our current policy, CBI, and then ultimately a completion report with progress shared on all of the goals over the course of this year in June of 2025. So the board is going to use in that March timeframe the current year progress and the initial preliminary composite evaluation, sort of as a formative evaluation measure. And you can see the progress toward the goal based on the distribution of those points that we talked about earlier. So multiple categories of progress goal attainment, whether it be exceeding expectations, attaining the goal, making satisfactory progress, needing more progress, or unsatisfactory progress, which that will not be how we'll roll, so to speak. That will essentially inform what the total points will be, and then between part 1 and part 2, if we scroll all the way down to part 3, will form the overall assessment using the composite scores for the standards and summaries in both Part 1 and Part 2. And the rating scale that's attached there is a 1 through 5 rating scale. Last but not least, if we go to the very last page, you'll see the steps in this formal evaluation process spelled out once again, that formative meeting that will be conducted in executive session prior to March 30th, with a summative annual evaluation being conducted prior to June 30th, 2025. So you'll see how that evaluation instrument will be utilized, the annual goals themselves, and then the overarching assessment and how that all comes together. So hopefully that, based on, again, those previous interactions, is a clean, very straightforward and aligned opportunity for not only how we are establishing these goals, but how we'll measure progress, how we'll share those updates. And then something that I'd like to at least bring forward with reference to how the goals over time will continue to identify multiple measures of success, or what we'll be referring to essentially as KPIs, key performance indicators. So what we're really doing this year is establishing a strong foundation across multiple goal categories, as well as taking the opportunity to comprehensively review and renew our strategic plan. So my vision as the year plays itself out relative to the progress demonstrated in each of these goals is that we will be able to get really granular in terms of what are those key performance measures within each of these goals, so that really by next year, the review or the renewed strategic plan will have KPIs through each of those indicators. And essentially that will become the cadence that we'll start to use moving into not only next year, but I would envision at least the next 3 to 5 years, so that we can be very clear with our community. Here's what success looks like within each of these different domains. Here's how those measures can be shared and articulated, almost like a scorecard for that performance. And really the effort is going to be very collaborative and very transparent in terms of this is where we are measuring our progress, as continuous improvement continues to be the muscle that we utilize across all of these goals. The last thing I'll mention, and I appreciate there's a lot that we can tie into all of this, so I'm excited to hear any other feedback or questions you may have, is that these goals, while they exist unto themselves, there's also certainly a lot of integration and overlap. So we recognize, just as one example, that any effort that we have in terms of enhancing employee compensation will certainly be tied to good fiscal stewardship, as well as partnering with our community, as well as what are those conversations and what are those discussions from a stakeholder engagement perspective that we need to elevate. I think it's also fair to say that any conversation or any work that we're engaged in, we should be able to tie back to how does this align with the goal that we have in front of us. So for example, just like the conversation we were having around GCQC, I would elevate both Goal 3, enhancing employee engagement, wellness, recruitment, and retention, as well as Goal 5 around stakeholder engagement. And then I think there's also a thread of Goal 8 in there in terms of effective policy development. So that's just one example. I think anytime we have these in front of us, and we'll probably have them posted in some kind of way, certainly these will be well shared across our entire community, available not only on our website, but through upcoming conversations. I will also tell you over the next 30, 60, 90 days, be everything that I continue to share from a perspective of here's why this is important, here's what we're focusing on, here's how we can involve all of our stakeholders together in our continuous pursuit. So again, just really excited about how this all comes together, how it articulates, and again, open to any other or additional feedback or questions you may have. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Any comments, questions, Mrs. Ewing?
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you. This is very, very comprehensive, and I appreciate you taking the time to explain how over time we will have more of those key performance indicators that then can be built in so that we can really have a good idea of what we're measuring. Because when I was reading through some of this, there wasn't a lot of specifics. When you think about SMART goals, it's difficult to make SMART goals if you don't have all of the data. And so this year will be all about, certainly we have some goals, but it will also be all about really identifying the areas that we want to see improvement and movement on, and then being able to make the SMART goals. So I appreciate that it's very data focused, which is right now in one of the things that we pride ourselves being on. And then I also like how on every single piece of this is it's not going to just be like the district or just, a teacher at a site making decisions, that it is going to be a collaborative effort, not only with our employees, but also with our stakeholders, so that it's really clear with our community where our values are and what we're working on, and how we not only need our employees to be all working towards the same thing, but the ways that even our stakeholders, our families, our students can be helping to help Peoria be successful in all of their pieces. And I think that answers the question that I had on the first one we were looking at on Goal 5, is just that I had asked that underneath the promote stakeholder engagement and strong community partnership, you had written anticipated board review timeline, just ongoing with updates as needed. And I was just afraid that if we didn't have a timeline built in, that it would get dropped. But it sounds like you're working on refining what it is that we're going to be measuring, and then can we get that onto a cadence where it's coming before the board, just so that we can see movement, positive movement on that goal. So those were my things. I'd love to hear what the rest of the board has to offer, and I may add on some things later. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Yeah, it's what I appreciate is the process that we did go through to take us to this point. Very inclusive, the amount of time that we spent, and ensuring that we had input in what this looks like. I also appreciate its alignment with not only our vision and mission, as a district, but yes, our values, and certainly our purpose and why we're here. So for me, it's I think it's been well thought out, and it is one that does influence everything we talk about every day, which is ensuring that our students have an equitable opportunity to be successful in safe and supportive environments, and that our teachers and staff, have work environments that are inspiring, every day. So I'm looking forward to continue to standing by your side and supporting you as you continue to lead this district. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Rooks?
Yeah, Dr. Summers, I did want to say from our last study session, I do appreciate the Table 2 district-wide climate and culture data with I think it was the parent one, the parent question, and the staff question, just changing those, because I just really think that hearing from parents, my child's school provides students a variety of academic support beyond the classroom, tutoring, that we got a 56. Like, I just love seeing a tentative goal that's substantial. Like, that is something to work on, because that is, that's what we're here for. We're making sure that these kids have an understanding of the concepts that they're learning in class. So I really like that you changed that. So I do appreciate that, adding that in.
Thank you.
And the staff one as well, because I know the staff development opportunities at my school district are very relevant to my work. That was a 49. I think that is something I've heard from staff, just talking with them, that the development opportunities, professional development, they just would like to see more of that, how it applies in the classroom in their work. So I appreciate you kind of changing those around and just really looking at ways to improve. And I love seeing the focus on our academics, because I know that was a big one for you, and I know also the teacher retention, but also the teacher pay. So I do appreciate you adding those in, and really, I look forward to seeing how you utilize that and improving it. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the feedback as well.
For anyone who is here or watching, if you want to go back to see the full comprehensive discussion during our study session, was it July 25th?
Yes.
Okay. And that is on the YouTube channel. So if you want to go back to hear every comment and everything that was made in regards to creating this, that would be where you'd want to go to watch that full comprehensive discussion. I echo what Mrs. Rook said. I really love that the first goal, that 1A goal of academic outcome. I think it's prioritized and placed correctly in this. And then again, obviously you're branded by now as Cadence. We've kind of unintentionally given that to you. I love the cadence that as community members, as teachers, as a board, we can all expect when these updates are going to be happening so that we can be all working together with the same information and understand when information is coming and when adjustments may come. I just think it will unify all of us together because we all know what we're working towards. I appreciate how succinct it is. I'm interested to see on 1B, the table 2, the district-wide climate and culture data. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves if we need to. I would just say my opinion would be don't hesitate to reach out to a third party if we really need to hone in to make sure that we're gathering exactly the data that we want with that. But overall, I'm just really excited. I'm a data nerd, and so I love having this trackable data that we can all kind of dig into together. So thank you.
Thank you.
May I just ask one question? I'm just wanting to clarify on the Table 1 academic performance categories, when you're talking about those, is that also going to incorporate our subgroups that we've been having study sessions on with our special education, English language learners? Is that going to be all kind of compiled, giving us updates, timeline along the way?
Yes, Mrs. Rook. So the final indicator is a composite aggregate of all student performance, and we will continue to provide updates that demonstrate optimally growth and achievement relative to each of our subgroup categories. So we decided not to necessarily parse all those out for the purpose of setting the goal, because at the end of the day, we really believe that every student every day includes performance across the entire spectrum for all, but that will not diminish at all the value of how are we really leaning in to what those important subgroup performance bands will look like. The other thing I'd like to mention just briefly to that point, we just rolled out our new assessment tool, STAR through Renaissance, and actually even yesterday with our principals began to look very closely at the very first beginning of the year baseline scores that students are demonstrating. And I can tell you that the tool provides so much of a vantage point to really understand the skills that students are currently demonstrating. And not only will it tell us really good data, but it informs instruction, and it really supports teachers as they are working the hard work of really making sure that we are individualizing and personalizing the type of learning that each student deserves. So it really will, I believe, help move the needle in terms of what our performance will be, but even more importantly, I think it gives us much more quality data in terms of what we're actually learning about how our instruction is making the difference and how our students are demonstrating growth. So over time, I envision that this table was really kind of a starting point for how we're identifying what those specific performance areas are. And with this particular assessment strategy that we're unleashing, the opportunities are truly endless. I will also add, I think it's so very important that as we're thinking about this at a very broad and district-wide type level, that it's not just about the conversations that we're having in aggregate, but these are conversations that really get down to the level of teachers, students, and families in terms of helping our own students understand, here is where you currently are. Let's set goals that really help them understand what those next steps are, which, by the way, from an evidence-based perspective, has a lot of value and effect size on student growth and improvement over time. So I just believe this is so timely, and the efforts that we're putting into that are really going to be, they're going to pay dividends. And I can just tell you, just the little bit of time that we were spending with our leaders yesterday, learning more about how this rolls out, it just sets the table for the types of conversations that we know are going to lead toward impact. So I'm excited to dig into that some more with you all as well, because I think it'll just illuminate it in some ways that gets down to some really actionable next steps.
That's awesome to hear, because I heard about the STARS program for my own kids. So I
love it.
Yep, super exciting. So I want to say, Dr. Hernandez, great job. Like, I know that was you and your team, so congratulations on that. And, obviously, thanking the principals and all the teachers that started that program at the beginning of the school year, because I know that that's a challenge, and I know my kids brought home the paper, so I'm excited to see the growth.
Excellent.
And to see what, I like that you can have the kids watch their goals, but then also if there is something that they're struggling with, they can point it out and then get that feedback from their teacher or that help, right? So that they're not just left behind. So I appreciate that.
Any other questions, comments? I just want to say, kind of piggybacking off what Ms. Rooks said, high expectations and having the students have control of part of the tracking process, I think is going to change not just student outcome, but also how the students feel about education in general, giving a greater sense of ownership. And really, that's kind of the tools of self-worth, of self-esteem, of feeling great is being able to have high expectations and then being able to track your success as you put that effort in. And so it's going to be great change.
Well said.
Very, very
Thank you.
excited. That being said, I need a motion.
I will motion to approve the 2024-2025 Superintendent Annual Goals and Superintendent Evaluation Tool.
I will second. We have a motion made by myself and a second made by Mrs. Rooks. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes with 4 yeas. Moving on to public comment, we only have a few tonight. We are going to start with Jody Brackett.
Okay, well, I would like to ask for the public comments to go back up on the meeting, in the front of the meeting, and I would like to put that on the agenda, the next one, please, to vote on it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment is Micah Dyer.
Well, good evening, Board, President Proudfit, Superintendent, Cabinets, and guests. My name's Micah, recent grad at PUSD, and as a few of you mentioned, today was the first day of classes at many universities, but at Arizona State as well. And as I walked through the campus at Arizona State University's West Valley, where I'm studying secondary ed with an emphasis in history, I was just really struck by the profound impact that PUSD has had on my life and the lives of so many others. And so I was driving here today, I really felt compelled to make a comment tonight. Earlier today, I ran into an old classmate of mine who I haven't seen in a number of years, someone I went to elementary school with, who's now an education major as well. I've also run into a number of people I went to high school with, and just in these number of interactions, the excitement we all felt to continue our journey of learning was really inspired by the number of educators and administrators that I and so many others have encountered in PUSD, and just really reminded me how fortunate I am and so many others are to have grown up in this district. One particularly meaningful connection I've maintained was with a former PUSD teacher who now works at ASU. And she's not a professor, but she's been a really consistent mentor and inspiration to me. And so running into her on campus these past few days has really been a reminder of really just how deeply our educators care for us, even long after we've left their classroom. And another moment that stood out to me recently, we had all the different education students across the ASU campuses came together, and we learned a little simple chant that we did when all the students came together, and it was, "Our job teaches your job." And I think that's just a little reminder that the vital role that educators play, not just in shaping individual lives, but really, I think, in shaping the foundation of our communities. So I don't think it gets said enough, but I just wanted to take a quick moment to really express my gratitude to all the educators, admin, to the board members who put a lot of work, to the cabinet members. The dedication and commitment and has not only prepared me academically, but also has really instilled a love for learning. It was really good to get back into the classroom today. And that drive to seek knowledge. Each and every one of you, people online, people within this district, have just touched thousands of lives. And so in ways that I think really echo throughout our lives and our future careers. So like I said, I just don't think it gets said enough. Thank you for everything that everyone here does, everyone throughout this district does. The work is really invaluable, and I'm honored to say I'm from PUSD. So thank you.
Thank you. Our final public comment is Ms. Trina Berg.
Good evening again. As you know, I am a high school earth-based science teacher. I teach at Ironwood High School, and I do this every year. I open my classroom. Anyone who ever wants to come visit, please come visit, see what's actually happening in our classrooms. I am teaching my favorite unit of the entire semester right now. It's astronomy beyond our solar system, Big Bang Theory, the supports for the Big Bang Theory. We are learning about light right now. Next week, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing labs on ultraviolet light. We're going to be looking at spectra. We're going to be identifying elements from those spectra. We're going to be looking at redshift and all of these really cool things. So I always open up my classroom anytime. I don't even need to know that you're coming. Just pop on in. My room is open. I think it's important to see what's happening in our classrooms. We do some really cool stuff on our campus and on all of our campuses. I encourage you to go visit classrooms. And like I said, my room is always open. So please come on and visit anytime you want to. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. We're going to move on to 10.1, report on upcoming meetings and events. Ms. Airy, do you have anything for us tonight?
President Proudfit, members of the board, nothing to add to the report this evening.
Thank you. 10.2, legislative, state, and local updates. Anything for us, Ms. Myers?
Thank you, President Proudfit, members of the governing board. I do not have a report. Thank you.
Wonderful. Moving on to 11.1, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Board members, anything to readdress? Mrs. Ewing?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Mr. Sandoval?
I don't have any items, thank you.
Mrs. Rooks?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that when I, on 3.1, recommended changes, adopt agenda, the reason why I voted no, just for the audience, is that I don't support putting parents and the community at these meetings last under public comment. I always believe that they come first because we serve them. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of why I voted no.
Thank you, and nothing for me this evening. Moving on to 11.2, request for future agenda items. Mrs. Ewing?
I don't have anything today.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yeah, it's a follow-up item. I know I've requested, or we received a Friday report on the possibility of internalizing our maintenance team versus contracting it out. And I would love to have a deeper conversation and unpack that in a deeper way, maybe at a study session where we talk about, the financial considerations, even the impact that it has on our sites, from a just an ethos perspective and certainly ownership regard, right? So anyway, just want to see if we can have a study session on bringing back maintenance internally versus contracting those services out.
I will second that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm like,
we'll both second that.
We're really
so
excited to talk
whoever-
about that.
I am actually very excited to talk about that. Yes, so motion made by Mr. Sandoval, seconded by either Mrs. Rooks or myself. Okay, is there anything? Yeah, anything for you, Mrs. Rooks?
Yeah, I did have, I know I just requested same thing, the MTSS data system, just because I have a lot of questions still around it, and especially around how it works with our special education kids. So that's a big one for me. So I know I've already requested that, but just kind of a heads up. But the other one, no, I wanted to, let's see, I wrote it down here. I wanted to request having a discussion, I don't know if it can be a study session for the board on the Hillsdale curriculum. I've heard a lot of great things about the Hillsdale curriculum. I wanted to know how we could possibly get it into the school district. So if there's a way to have a study session with the governing board on the Hillsdale curriculum.
Can I have a question on that, just so I can better understand what you're asking? Is for any curriculum, we have policy on how curriculum is reviewed and the teams that it goes to, and the process of it has to be, put out in the lobby and reviewed for so many days, and it goes through that whole process.
Yeah, it's a bidding process.
So, are you asked? So I'm just curious. Since we have that process put together, what specifically are you asking?
Well, looking at, I know we have a lot of contracts that come in for different online resources. Discovery Education, Cengage. I know I've heard those ones previously. So just looking at to see if that can be brought in even as a resource for teachers to use in the classroom.
So would that be like additional, like supplemental resources? Because I know that has the same, similar process whenever it's a supplemental, maybe Dr.
That's why I
Hunt-
was kind of just saying, like, have a just study session on that of just what that process would look like if there is any ways to bring it in under supplemental resources or another avenue.
Okay. I'm trying to understand what would be the process for that the
Right.
steps in the process and so forth. So I don't know if you can offer any insight to that.
I was just going to say,
It's a future request agenda item, so just, I'm requesting to have a discussion on that from them, so then. 'cause
Okay,
this
so
is
I just didn't know if that would be outside of the way resources are, I don't even know if it's called if it's correct to say the procurement process, but it's not typical that the board says, I would like to have this specific resource and then have it examined. It's usually that it's part of like we need science or we need a supplemental resource for like IB, and then we have to go out and get so many bids and so forth. So I just want to make sure that whatever our board is approving and is being on there, it's following what the processes we already have in place that we have to follow in order to request curriculum. I just want to make sure we're not going outside of that. That's all.
President
Yeah,
Proudfit,
that's why I was just.
I'd be happy to
Yes, please.
have a study session item dedicated to understanding and unpacking policy IJJ.
okay, that would be
Dr.
wonderful,
Hernandez.
yes. I guess I will have a second that. And just for point of clarity, having understanding about Hillsdale curriculum is it's not like a textbook or there is that component, but it is actually a way of teaching. And so it's going to be a little bit more involved than just having a specific resource or a specific, but yes, that would be great to have you
so
look into
just-
that.
That's
yes,
why I was
to start
looking.
that
And
discussion.
then, last one, I would like to request for a board vote on public comment moving back up to the beginning of the board meetings for the community. So. Okay. No second. Okay.
Moving on to 12.1, adjournment. I move that we adjourn this meeting at 7:27 p.m.
I'll second that.
We have a motion made by myself and a second made by Mr. Sandoval. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned at 7:27 p.m. Thank you all for coming and get home safely.